Good evening. This evening is April 8th and it's 5:30 p.m. and we are starting our work session. And tonight we'll start out with Mr. McCain, our Chief of Staff, and he's going to give us some updates.
Thank you. First update, just another reminder that May 18th from 8 to 3 at CSU Pueblo and the fairgrounds is the cleanup day. Black Hills is helping with the flyer, so that should be out soon. And another thing, the Board of Elections has one opening and applications are due on the 22nd. So that's coming up fast. If anybody's interested and want to apply, they should do that. And then Friday, fire update. The Vision Hills fire is 100% contained as of afternoon of Monday, April 8th. Total of 108 acres were affected. No lives lost, no structures lost, and no injuries. The Evraz fire is 100% contained as of Saturday, April 6th. Jurisdiction was turned back over to Evraz with their on-site fire personnel. The air quality alert that was issued by Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment was due to the smoke in the air. EPA Region 8 came down and evaluated both the air and quality and assisted with water testing to both St. Charles Mesa and the Bessemer Ditch. They determined there was no threat to water quality as a result of the firefight. We had 3 injuries to our Pueblo Fire Department firefighters who were medically evaluated and released to return to duty with no restrictions. A total of 80,000 gallons of water flowed at Evraz. We activated the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, to level 1 with co-response from many partner agencies, including Pueblo County Sheriff's Office, excuse me, Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment, American Red Cross, Pueblo Police Department, Pueblo Fire Department, Pueblo County Commissioners, Huerfano County, Pueblo County CSU Extension Office, EPA Region 8, Pueblo County, Colorado State Patrol, dispatch personnel with both the city and county, and many others who helped respond. Also, there was assistance from local businesses, including restaurants, food, and supplies during the effort. So big thank you to them. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions from council? Okay, with no question. Okay, go ahead.
Was there any indication of why it started, or was it just something that was?
Nothing at this time, but they're looking into both the fires on it, but no word yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Well, with that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll move to our lobbyist, Mr. Romero, Gil Romero with the Capital Success Group. Good evening, Mr. Romero.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you for the time. Short report tonight for you and Mayor Graham, President Aliff, and members of council, not because we're not extremely busy up there, but this is that point in the session where they do the state budget and they started in the House and it's completed its process in the Senate. And during that period of time, a lot of the legislation that we're following for the city is not moving. So just a couple of reports, because I've heard from several city council members on just some budget issues. We expect tomorrow some sort of report of a prioritization list of the bills, some of which the city is following in with respect to childcare and public safety, a prioritization list of both the Senate and the House on how they'll spend the 12 million each, that they have a total of 24 million between the House and the Senate. I can tell you a number of bills that are in appropriations in both the Senate and the House have huge appropriations, and it's our belief that a lot of those bills will not make it out of the process because they have such a significant appropriation. But we'll have a better idea of what that looks like tomorrow, and we'll send out that report. Briefly, just to give you an update on Senate Bill 166, which is the bill that the city is opposing, and which is the bill that Evraz is the most concerned about. We've been working on that bill on behalf of the city. It has still not been scheduled in Senate Finance. But we believe we have the votes based on the current count to kill that bill, Senate Bill 165. So we'll continue to work it until the hearing in Senate Finance, until the actual vote takes place in Senate Finance. The other bill that we're obviously very concerned about is House Bill 1338. This is the one that we believe we're sort of on the target list along with Commerce City, where they have Suncor to be designated as an impacted community. I've met with members of the House and sponsors, Representative Rutnell on behalf of the city, to see if we can get an amendment. This is an amendment that Evraz would like, and I'll read it to you. It says, for those that are part of this environmental equity and cumulative impact analysis, we would like this provision added. A community shall not be selected for an ESHA study without the contractor first conducting public hearings to solicit input from the community at large and obtaining written consent from the elected body which has jurisdiction over the community. We've submitted that language to the governor. I know that Evraz is working hard. We're working hard to try to get some agreement on that. So far, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has not agreed to that language, but we'll continue to work on that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to give you a short report on the bills that have been in the process and have moved during since our last meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Ryan Romero with Capital Success Group. Just a couple of updates on bills that we're following. First up, last week was the hearing for House Bill 1372, regulating law enforcement use of prone restraints. It was passed out of committee as amended on a vote of 8-3, and now it's headed to the Appropriations Committee. A significant amendment known as a strike blow amendment was adopted by the House Judiciary Committee. With the amendment, law enforcement would still be able to use prone restraints under certain circumstances. Overall, law enforcement representatives were appreciative and receptive of the amendment, but there's still outstanding concerns with the placement of the policy under Title 18 and how the policy might impact law enforcement recruitment and retention and increase the time officers spend reviewing camera footage, paperwork, administrative duties, etc. With that said, we would recommend staying in the opposed position until the language is further clarified, or until we hear otherwise from Chief Knoller or the Chiefs of Police Association. And we will continue to work with the Chiefs of Police Association and other stakeholders. And on that note, a big thank you to Chief Knoller if he's in the room. I know that was a long day. The bill before it took a couple hours, and we were bouncing in between committees. I know Alec got a chance to talk to you, but a big thank you for hanging out up there. And you know, I know it was a long day, so thank you. And as I just mentioned, before 1372, House Judiciary, they heard House Bill 1284, which would have prohibited judges without the consent of a district attorney from releasing a person on an unsecured personal recognizance bond if the person is accused of committing a crime of violence. And that bill was killed, unfortunately. I think not surprisingly, but somewhat surprisingly. But and last but not least is House Bill 1239. This is a bill we've talked about a couple of times. The title is Single Exit Stairway Multifamily Structure. Following intense concerns expressed by the fire community during the House Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee, the bill was laid over until this Wednesday for action only, so we'll be keeping a close eye on that. The fate of the bill remains unclear, which was one of the main reasons they laid it over, is they weren't sure if they would have the votes to get it through. So they were going to work on amendments, and one of the sponsors has indicated that he intends to bring forward an amendment to make the bill largely, but not entirely permissive. But it's unclear if that's going to be enough to satisfy the opponents. So those are a couple of things we'll be keeping an eye on this week. And as Gil said, we're just waiting for most of these bills are still sitting in appropriations, so we'll wait and see what this list looks like tomorrow as far as their priorities, and then we'll see which of these bills are going to make it out of appropriations. And that's my report for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the time. We'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have a question. What is the status of the safe injection sites bill? I remember, didn't it pass through the first step, and has there been any talk about it since?
I'm gonna look that up just to make sure, but I believe it had its second reading hearing. But I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. In the
No
meantime, anyone else have a question? Counselor Martinez?
Hey, Gil, can you clarify? Because I'm not, I guess I'm missing something. So the appropriation committee gets out tomorrow, and then they're making a list of all of the, what the long bill is going to have appropriations for, or what's the big deal with tomorrow?
Okay, so, and I probably didn't do a very good job, Councilor Martinez. So the budget process has gone through the House and they've gone through the Senate. And one of the things that they did as part of the appropriations process is they did a set aside. It's called a set aside of $24 million. And that $24 million is supposed to take care of all of the bills that are in appropriations. And obviously there are bills and appropriations that have a higher price tag than the $24 million allocated, 12 million per House, 12 million per Senate. So what the legislature decided to do, Councilor Martinez, is that they created a Google Doc and they asked each legislator to prioritize the bills that are in appropriations. And there are some big ones, as you know, in appropriations, and decide how high of a priority they would put on that particular bill. And in some of the bills have tried to reduce their appropriation, but that document, that Google Doc that they created both for the Senate and the House, we will have that list out for you. And you can see the bills that they were and where they've been prioritized, and you'll get a better idea of what bills are going to get funded this year. I apologize for not being more clear about that.
No, it's super interesting. Do they normally have that process, or is that a new process?
That is a brand new process. And it was prompted by a lawsuit that Democrats filed last year in the House, where they alleged that some Democrats were holding secret meetings, and they used an app to count votes on committee to decide where they were on certain bills. That particular lawsuit by Representative Epps and Representative Marshall prompted them to try to do a more transparent process for how they're going to allocate this 24 million. So it's brand new. I have no idea what that document's going to look like. We're still under the belief that they're going to set aside some money for childcare, and there was some money that the Joint Budget Committee did set aside for that purpose, because it was something that the governor wanted, but it had a huge price tag. So we'll have a better idea, and that's why I said we'll have a more robust report for the city next week after we see what happens tomorrow. But we'll get that document out to you tomorrow. If you have any questions about that prioritization list, let us know.
Thanks, Gil.
Anyone else? Were you able to get that information, Ryan?
Yes, ma'am. So it has gone through the House, and now it's waiting for its committee of reference in the Senate, but it hasn't been scheduled yet.
Okay.
And just so you know, Madam Chair, on that one, you know, it's the city has the power to decide whether or not they want to site a safe injection site. And as I think Alec told you last week, the governor has expressed to the legislature, he's not going to sign that bill. But we will get you more information. I still want to get some clarification because I heard some conflict on that, on the governor's position, but we had heard before that he wouldn't sign that bill. So we'll continue to watch that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Gina,
Um,
excuse me.
So, Ms. Counselor Latino.
Thank you. Gil, I don't know if you can help us with this or not, but I'm getting some people, and I just thought about asking you, that are calling me and wanting to know why their property taxes have tripled, doubled and tripled. And some of the research that I've done it's coming from the State House, obviously. Is there anything you can elaborate? Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
I'm going to defer that to Alec. Alec has been following the Property Tax Commission. And I don't know where the report, has a report been finalized, Alec?
Yeah, so the Commission on Property Tax, they finished their work. They had to finish that work up by the 15th. And so they submitted a preliminary report. And so the plan is from the sponsors that we've talked to is that they're going to bring forward some of those ideas in legislation. But on the other side of that is there's a lot of ballot measures being crafted right now, and some pretty conservative ones that would cap property tax increases. So we're just kind of in a wait and see period with what they decide to bring forward the legislature to try and address this issue. And so there's a lot of solutions that they have floating out there right now. And once we have a better idea of what those bills will be, we can certainly get those to you. But there is the big thing out there, which is those ballot measures. And so that's what the state's competing against.
So just to close on that, Councilor Latino, we'll get you, if you would like, especially in your town halls, we can try to get you sort of some bullet points so you can talk to your constituents about it. But we'll know a little bit more about that, as Alex said, in the next couple of weeks. But if you continue to get questions, and it's true, property taxes are going up, and that's why this commission was formed, so that they can try to address the escalating costs of property tax, and because it leads to the dilemma of people not being able to buy houses and afford a house. So if you'd like us to gather the preliminary information, or if you want to wait until we see what some of these ideas are, we'll just let us know.
I appreciate that. The other concern that's been expressed to me is that vacant property lots adjacent to homes that are owned by the property owners, those prices are going up 3 and 4 times. Again.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know why. Thank you.
Well, we'll send you that preliminary report if you'd like, and then you can take a look at it and then let us know what else you need.
Thank you.
Counselor Flores.
Thank you. As I understand, when the ballot measure last year lost, having to do with some property tax relief, it was decided that every Coloradoan would get $800 on their state income tax. And I had forgotten about that piece, but there is an $800 relief, I guess. And the reason I know that is I did my taxes last week. And in your state taxes, they're going to give you $800 back. But it's not intended for you to use that. I mean, there's no connection to the property tax. But in my head, I'm thinking, because my taxes went up a lot too this year. And I'm thinking in my head that the $800 will help alleviate how much they went up. They went up about 30%. It was crazy. But if that's a consolation to maybe the people that are calling you, and I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the Tabor refund,
That's my favorite.
Counselor Forrest.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, with that being said, I'm going to introduce our next,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
guest. Oh, thank you, gentlemen, for your time this
Yeah.
evening.
Thank you.
Always very valuable. Thank you. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our next guest, Miss Aubrey Adams with Every Brain Matters. And Aubrey is returning from last year. She's spoken in front of us before, but it's an ever evolving data and statistics that she's gathering. Colorado prides itself on being the first state to legalize marijuana. And then there's others in this state that feel like we were just not necessarily the leader in the legalization, but the guinea pig. And so Aubrey has been a longtime resident. She's gone away she left her profession to study this matter because she's had some personal effects from what she's about to talk about tonight. And she's back to update us as she's traveled the country. And I think you've been out of the country too, speaking, haven't you, Aubrey?
Just online.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All righty. Well, welcome. Oh, turn your mic on too, Aubrey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Regina Mastery, for having me here today and asking me to come and work. And thank you all the council members for listening to me today. I know what I'm about to speak to about marijuana is a contentious issue. I know there's strong opinions on both sides, but I'm here to just talk about facts and the reality of how it's affecting Pueblo families. So as Regina had mentioned, that my family was highly affected. I had 2 loved ones affected, developed cannabis use disorder and symptoms of psychosis from the marijuana use. And through my advocacy work, I started volunteering and warning other states not to adopt these policies that promote addiction, that promote mental illness. And because I was kind of a lone wolf, a lone voice there for a long time, and I kind of thought, well, I feel alone, but really what's happened is just escalated to the point that we are in crisis. And it's a silent crisis that many people don't want to address. But there are consequences for adapting policies that promote these products. Through my advocacy work, I've been given a lot of opportunities that I've been very grateful for. One is to develop my own nonprofit that I named Every Brain Matters. The logo that I have here, I'd like to come back next year and talk a little bit more about that because I want to drive a cultural change with that, where our families just don't have enough voices in this issue. And I want to bring some positivity back to the conversation, and I want to bring hope. That's the whole reason why I have the nonprofit now. So today's marijuana is not like yesterday's marijuana. It's much more potent. The increased potency is purposeful. It's to increase the risk of becoming addicted so the industry can profit more. This is a strategy the industry adopted from the tobacco industry. These products are much more accessible. We were told that they would become less accessible if they were regulated. That is not true. When we promote these products and people are buying them, they're ending up in our schools, at our friends' homes. So now, not only do we need to have conversations when we allow our children to go play at another person's house about, or do you have guns that are, accessible? Are they locked up? We need to ask, are you growing marijuana? Are you using marijuana? Because these homes that are doing that are targets for crime. The industry makes products that are fast, that are easy to use and provide a fast, potent hit to the brain, like through the vapes and the edibles. They design products to look like normal looking foods on purpose to normalize the use. And there's a decreased perception of harms and risks by the propaganda campaigns that they have promoted. One of their messages is that it's less harmful than alcohol, and I'll explain why that is not true. So there's been this decreased perception of harms and risk. So there's a huge lack of education, and that's where I like to come in. I like to talk to people about it and have this conversation, not trying to project my opinion or tell them what they can consume in their bodies, but just that they're an informed consumer. So if they are having adverse reactions, it's okay to stop using and ask for help. So the normalization, commercialization, and of these industrialized products has brought in a new era. We are in a totally new era than we were before. And these are some of the products that are being sold here today in Colorado. I think this pointer might work. So this one right here is called Shatter. It's a highly concentrated THC products. They're also called dabs, wax, and they kind of come in little different forms depending on the content of water and air in them. They have salsa water. They have a THC powdery, sugary looking thing that people put in their coffees and teas. They have THC pills. They have vapes. I took this picture at a Denver dispensary where they put sugary flavors in the vapes to mask the toxic foulness of the products. They have THC inhalers, THC infused pretzels, sodas, and then they have really discreet vapes that contain large amounts of THC that look like crayons. So like I mentioned before, this is not like alcohol. This is not safer than alcohol. Alcohol is a water-soluble drug, but the cannabinoids, the drugs, the chemicals in the cannabis plant or marijuana plant are fat-soluble. So they adhere to the fats in our bodies, and our fattiest organ is, does anybody know what our fattiest organ is? Our brain. I heard it in the audience. So it truly affects the brain and is not necessarily released out of the system as alcohol is. So there's lots of diagnoses, lots of adverse effects that can come from using these products, but there's three main ones. One I mentioned before, cannabis use disorder. That's the medical terminology for addiction to marijuana. There's cannabis-induced psychosis, which I will explain more what that is, but that's when a person has a break from reality. The symptoms are hallucinations, delusions, or irrational thoughts or behaviors. And they also have cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Cannabinoid means the chemicals in the marijuana plant. Hyperemesis means excessive vomiting. And it's a syndrome because there's not an exact test they use to diagnose these. They diagnose it by the symptoms. Now, the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome is when the consumer becomes at toxic levels of them from consuming marijuana. So if you consume too much alcohol, usually the person will start vomiting. And within a few hours or a day, most of the time that person will recover because it's a water-soluble drug and your body will expel it. The problem with marijuana, when a person or consumer becomes at toxic levels, you don't necessarily release the drug from your body because it's the fat-soluble substance. So it adheres to the fats in our bodies and the receptor sites of the endocannabinoid system. So people that become at these toxic levels can be sick for hours, days, weeks, or months, and it's very difficult for them to recover. And I can come back and talk more about that later, but this is such a large issue. I know I have a limited amount of time. So talking about the cannabis-induced psychosis, which I explained before is a break from reality where a person might hallucinate. Usually it's auditory hallucinations. They might have grandiosity beliefs like they're God, they're a rock star, they're going to be president of the United States. And this is such a huge issue. And I'm on the phone every day with people that have this, and my loved ones have experienced this. But out of all the drugs that can induce psychosis, those temporary symptoms of psychosis, cannabis results in the highest conversion rate from temporary psychotic symptoms to chronic psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar. Now, many drugs can induce psychosis, but the conversion rate with marijuana to chronic psychiatric disorders like chronic psychosis is the worst out of all the drugs because of its fat soluble content. So there's a 5-fold increase for schizophrenia. So we cannot deny that marijuana can cause mental illness, and it is contributing to the homeless crisis here, to the crime crisis, the really just insane violence that we see here, and it's expanding across the country and across the world. Another study that just came out recently from the psychological medicine, it's out of Denmark. They did analysis over 5 decades with 6 million people. It's a very large, robust study. And they estimated that 30% of the people that have schizophrenia would not have it if it wasn't for their cannabis use disorder. That's 1/3 of the people with mental illness. Also, using marijuana increases the risk for suicide up to 7-fold. Science finds cannabis use is associated with a higher prevalence of suicidal ideation, plan, and attempt among US young adults 18 to 25. And we know people here in Pueblo that have been affected. And then if you have the psychosis on top of it, it's even a four-fold increase for suicide death. Now, because they got more policies passed at the state level, we're really seeing the impacts of this. We know that of all Colorado teenagers from ages 15 to 19 who took their lives, 42% of them have THC in their system. Among Hispanics, that rate goes up to 58%. And for African Americans, it goes up to 67%. So we passed a policy that is harming disadvantaged communities. And it's spreading across the nation. Nationwide, since 2019, the number of kids diagnosed with cannabis-induced mental disorders, including schizophrenia and psychotic episodes, increased by 50%. And as a result, as I mentioned before, I had to get out of Pueblo. I had to get my children out of Pueblo. I was in a fight for my son's life. And there wasn't a lot of resources here. And I just want to give a shout out to Joe Latino, who helped me during some of those crisis times, searching for my son. And I got a little bit of help, but I realized that I needed to provide an environment that would support my son's health and have the resources in the community of sober peers. And I moved to Texas and I joined a recovery community there. And I became a host mom for youth in recovery for 4 years. So I learned a lot about addiction. I learned a lot about accountability with these youth and how to steer them on the right pathways. And I couldn't have done that on my own if I didn't have a community surrounding me. So I developed resources for these families that don't know where to turn, don't know where to go. And I run support meetings online for them. So this is just a picture of all the resources I've gathered. This is the main purpose I have Every Brain Matters, is so families can find hope again in the world that's embracing this high concentrations of marijuana, making it more accessible. Where does a family turn? Every Brain Matters will steer you in the right direction. Through my advocacy work, apologize about the misspelling, I've been given a lot of opportunities. I went to Ohio and I knew we couldn't combat the industry there. We were totally outfunded, but wherever I was invited to give a voice, I showed up and I spoke to people, I educated them, I spoke to the media. And after they legalized, I was given the opportunity to testify at the Ohio Senate Governmental Committee to advocate for more stricter regulations and to show them what happens to a family impacted by these policies. And before, we would only get a few thousand views. People were like, oh, whatever, whatever she's saying. But this was picked up by the mainstream media and it was placed on Twitter and I got over 750,000 views. I am very proud of that. I was even, one of a major media outlet did a hit piece on me because they were so upset with me. How dare I get up there and tell the truth to Ohio legislators? I've been in contact with the Dr. Phil show on several different occasions. They called me last November again and said, we want you to help you. We want you to help us produce a show. I was very happy to. So this is us behind the scenes. The show will come out at the end of April, early May. And this show will feature families impacted by cannabis-induced psychosis. Dr. Phil was very gracious. He understands the issue. He understands this is why, one of the main reasons why our country is deteriorating. So you see me standing there holding my Dr. Phil sign. And this is Randy and Heather Bacchus. Their son came to Colorado because he loved marijuana. He became addicted, psychotic. He videotaped himself having psychotic episodes. And unfortunately, he took his life. He was a beautiful young man, talented, smart. And this courageous family now tells their story wherever they can go. Next to them is my friend Linda Wolf and her son Colby. Linda would call me frequently over the past 3 years when Colby would go into another episode of cannabis-induced psychosis. He just didn't experience it once, not twice, but 3 times. The last time he ended up in an Antifa camp in Portland, and we would pray together and I would support her and just hope he would make it out alive, and he did. And now he is courageous enough to tell his story. And when he got on the stage with Dr. Phil, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. Very proud of this young man. And of course, at the end, you probably recognize Dr. Karen Randall, Pueblo's local ER physician. There are heroes here in Pueblo that will not give up, and they tell what's happening here all over the world. And she was featured on Dr. Phil, and she did a phenomenal job. Very proud of her. This is one of the projects I've developed. We're getting ready to release with Every Brain Matters, and it's called The Voices of Marijuana Harms. The effects of marijuana are dangerous and increasing, and we're telling our stories so you don't have to. On the top there, it says cannabis psychosis transported to hell. Now, this is a local Colorado young man, Javante Hill. And he only smoked marijuana for the 2nd time. This is why this is not like alcohol. You become psychotic. You can become psychotic from one use of marijuana. You cannot do that with alcohol. So we've got to get the public to understand the risks of this. He became psychotic. He got a gun. He shot his 2 dogs and he shot his girlfriend. His girlfriend survived. One of his dogs survived. He recovered. And now he's on a mission to warn the world about what happened to him that night. And he's recovering well. He's back in school and he's doing great. He's a wonderful young man. This Catherine Mayberry on the bottom. Her parents are going around the country telling her story. They call her first death when she experienced cannabis-induced psychosis, her 2nd death when she overdosed on fentanyl and meth. So denying that there's not a connection from cannabis to fentanyl and to the drug problem is just not in the best interest of our country. It's happening to our families. Now, this is a story that is going to change the trajectory of America. This is Bren Spacer. Bren Spacer liked a guy, Chad O'Melia. You'll see him at the end there. She was dating him for a few weeks. Chad was a regular marijuana user, a daily user. And she took a hit off his bong that night. She liked him. She wanted to be impaired, get high, whatever. We think that we're going to have a good time. Just kind of feel that euphoria, eat a bag of chips, right? Have some giggles. Well, she didn't feel the effects from the first hit of bong. So Chad stacked the bong, made it very potent in the chamber. She took the 2nd hit and she became acutely psychotic. She grabbed a butter knife from the kitchen and she stabbed Chad O'Melia 108 times. Then she stabbed her dog. And when the police arrived on the scene, she was stabbing herself in the neck. This would have been a murder-suicide, but the police intervened and stopped her from killing herself. They saved her life. This happened in 2018. This just came to trial a few months ago. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. They said she had involuntary intoxication. I disagree. This is not intoxication. This is involuntary psychosis. Bryn did not know when she put the bongs to her lip that night that she could become psychotic and violent and kill her friend. Now, this trial, everybody says like it's promoted like that she said she was in cannabis-induced psychosis here. No. The experts, she was caught on cam, all the symptoms, she was taken to the hospital. The experts in this trial on both sides, the prosecuting and the defense, agreed this was cannabis-induced psychosis. And that's what caused her to kill her friend that night. Since our side, our families don't have the backing of money and political equity, we are now advocating for lawsuits. We have families filing lawsuits throughout the country. One is currently being done in Michigan, and they're having a lot of success with it. And now Aaron Kress here, you see him on the end. He's getting ready to file a class action lawsuit here in Colorado. And we're very proud of this moment. This is what we have been working on. And he is in contact with people from here, from Pueblo. And we will hold the marijuana industry accountable. If policies don't pass, ordinances don't pass and get more regulations, and we don't get the education, we will sue to get the money to educate the public and warn them. They deserve to know the truth. Anybody out there who's listening, we do need another plaintiff. If you've been diagnosed in the past 2 years with cannabis use disorder, cannabis-induced psychosis, or cannabis hyperemesis syndrome by any product from the Colorado marijuana industry, please contact me at everybrainmatters.org. And here's a study that came out just a few weeks, that just came out about, this came out a while ago, 2021. And it says, compared to those who have never saw billboards or storefronts ads, those who said they saw them most of the time or always had 7 times the odds of frequent cannabis use and nearly 6 times the odds of having symptoms of cannabis use disorder. So this is a picture I took on the south side off of Pueblo Boulevard across from the Walmart, that smaller Walmart. And I was really shocked to see this because I didn't see this before when I lived here in Pueblo. To me, this sign needs to come down. This was against the state law. So I don't know why this is up in Pueblo. Why are our children being exposed to this advertising? 2 big studies came out. One in March about cannabis and pregnancy. Prenatal cannabis use increases the risk for ADHD by 30%. Our kids are already struggling. Why would we want to induce that more? Why would we allow an industry to promote marijuana to pregnant women? And the Journal of the American Heart Association found that any use of marijuana was linked to higher heart attack and stroke risks. Stroke risk rose by 42%, heart attacks rose by 25%. So no matter what, this is costing us. This is costing us in our ERs. This is costing the people of Pueblo their health. And then I'll kind of skip over this slide and not go into the detail of it, but this is a study from Ed Wood. He's a Coloradan who has become an expert on marijuana impaired driving. And what he has proven is that the 5 nanogram per se law here is not sufficient. Somebody could test positive for 1 nanogram or 5 nanogram. The 1 nanogram could be more impaired than the 5. So the policies that they have passed here are not working, and we have people being killed on our roads and not being held accountable. So he is on a mission and he's changing policy. He's doing a great job. So what I need Pueblo to understand is that what happens here changes the world. If we can get more regulations here, we can get more education here. The world is watching. Pueblo is considered ground zero for the marijuana expansion movement. So here's a few of my recommendations, and I even put more in your packet here. But 1, education. I would like to have my own billboard education signs throughout Pueblo warning people so they're seeing them while they're driving around. Have a potency cap on these products. That'll be a harm reduction thing we can do to really, it wouldn't take away the total harms, but it would help decrease the harms. Outlaw billboard signs, that's just not something our children need to be seeing. The children of Pueblo deserve so much better than that. And draw a line in the march to expand access to drugs. Allowing access to non-FDA approved psychedelics will increase the drug and mental illness crisis here in Pueblo. So let's draw the line. Let's not allow these shops to open up in Pueblo. Some people will have good trips. Some people will have psychotic trips and end in violence, and we don't need to take that risk. We already have enough problems we can't handle. Let's focus on drug prevention and recovery policies and stop expanding harm to the Pueblo people. And I thank you very much for my presentation. And I'm going to end with asking Regina a favor, if she could read this letter from Maranon. Maranon is a 12-step program for families affected by another person's marijuana use. It's the Al-Anon of AA. Maranon is for family members who have loved ones addicted to marijuana. We have started support groups for families that have loved ones with cannabis-induced psychosis. And so I've asked Regina to read this letter to close, and I'm happy to answer any questions or have any more conversations about this. And I thank you.
Okay. Yes, you had asked me to read it, and I hadn't seen it, and I agreed. But I don't have anything, negative to say about the letter. I just see how impactful it could be. And also, when you're speaking, and I know you started this movement, but you're working with all kinds of medical professionals, mental health and medical professionals around the nation. And a lot, I was really impressed with the group of doctors here locally that started with you way back when you started this. And so your data doesn't just come from, Aubrey calling and asking for data. It's from people who are collecting the data for you in the profession, the medical profession. And so I'll go ahead and read this. I have cannabis-induced psychosis. I need your help. Marijuana caused me to experience a break from reality. The delusions and hallucinations I'm experiencing seem real to me. Please don't tell me otherwise or say that I'm crazy. Don't blame, shame, scold me, or let me provoke your anger. Arguing with me may push me away. When I'm experiencing a mental health crisis, don't excuse any negative behaviors. Please maintain healthy boundaries with me. Accountability allows me to recover. Call for help if I try dangerous things or if I'm a threat to myself or others, even when you think I'm bluffing. Lock up any weapons in the house. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. Please don't make me responsible for your fears. Seek support for yourself. I know it's not easy. You knew me before this happened. Have hope. And know that I'm in there somewhere. Do learn all that you can about marijuana and marijuana psychosis. Attend Maranon meetings and go to open marijuana anonymous meetings. They're the people who can help you see the situation clearly. I love you, your loved one with CIP. It's very impactful, Aubrey, because, we're a council and a community that cares about children. And we're seeing, high rates of suicide in this state. Since we've legalized and so forth. And, we talk about the issues, like you were saying, homelessness and drug addiction and leading to, and you can't, in order to solve things, you have to talk about the truth. Otherwise, all you're doing is just talking about some dreams that will never happen if you don't deal with the truth of the matter. And so with any questions from council? No questions, huh?
I have some
No.
questions.
Okay. Mr.
Well, maybe it's not a question, it's more of a statement. Aubrey, I want to commend you because I'm with you 100% on this. Having worked with young people, having seen what I've seen, having put young people in ambulances in the northern part of the state when I was an administrator at this large high school was the beginning for me. You and I have worked together and I applaud you, I commend you, and know that I will support you. Because we need to do something about the drugs, and the drug culture in this community is not very good. Recreational marijuana is one thing, medical marijuana is a whole nother thing. And again, I support you 100% and I will work with you.
Thank you, Joe. God bless you.
Counselor Gomez.
Is there any data out there indicating if this is a starter or gateway drug that you have in reference to years ago in the 70s, 80s was a little different, but now with the potency of today's marijuana, do we have any data out there that we can look to?
Yeah, you can go to my website. I have a science section and you just go down and it says Gateway and you can read all the studies. When a person becomes addicted to marijuana, some might not go into other drugs, but when they're having like the psychosis, especially, it's a suffering. They're hearing voices in their head, they're having delusions, they're losing their self-esteem. It's a dehumanizing drug. So they're wanting to self-medicate and reach for drugs that might give them a higher dopamine release. And of course, there's more drugs on the streets like that and they're cheaper. So yes, it can be a gateway drug, not for everybody, but for some. It was for my loved one. I've seen it all the time. Once, I call it a pediatric disease. Once the pediatric disease of addiction embeds into the brain, it's really hard to get them back. And when you live in a community like Pueblo and you're a family trying to recover and provide an environment for your child that they can recover, it's really hard because there's a lot of pressure here to use, not just marijuana, but the other drugs too. So that's a great question and you can research that on the,
Yeah, one more thing. In reference to the new fentanyl, it's called carfentanil. They estimate it's about 10,000 times more potent than morphine, and that's how serious it is. If you touch it with your finger, you can actually die on the spot. And I'm just curious, with the marijuana that's out there today, are they lacing that in the marijuana? Because it's very, people are making it themselves. It's very inexpensive to make. And I'm just curious, are they finding that in marijuana as well?
yeah, unfortunately, all drugs are being laced with fentanyl. Unfortunately, and the carfentanil, my sponsor's son died from carfentanil back in I think it was 2017. And the drug, it was killing too many of the customers off, so they backed off and went to the fentanyl. So it kind of goes in cycles and it's very dangerous. I'm not sure by touching it that you can die. I'm not sure about that fact. I've gotten mixed information on that, but growing up, people used to have experimental, bouts about using different drugs and just being curious. But our message to our children nowadays is just not worth it because of fentanyl on the scene, because of one use of marijuana, you can have a psychotic experience. So, it's just not safe to have that. We need to teach our kids not to use. We don't want to be trying to control them, but this issue is so large and it's not getting any better.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. My wife substitute teaches all over this city, all over our city, from the elementary, middle school to the high school. And when I pick her up, when she does sub, which is pretty frequently, what's most disheartening is what she shares with me, particularly at the elementary schools. And she's not a medical professional, but she's a mother that's raised 4 kids, 4 children. And something just isn't right.
Well, I'm glad she does that service to Pueblo, and it is devastating to see what's in our schools. I mean, my son couldn't go back to Pueblo schools and nobody really checked on him after that. You know, he just kind of disappeared. And if he didn't have parents advocating for him and trying to find the resources for him, he would have just been another number. I can tell you, I got really serious about my son's use, and we lost all our equity. We own 2 homes off Elizabeth Street, and we sold them to help pay for treatment. And we've been paying all these years. And it's devastated us not only emotionally and broke our family up, and every family member is affected, every family member. It took all our finances, and we're kind of like 20-year-olds starting over again. We have nothing. My husband and I were just talking the other day about, we don't even have like equipment to mow a lawn or anything anymore because we sold it all to pay for treatment. So it's serious. I'd sell it all again to help him recover. It's just material things, but I'm scared what's happening with the kids in the elementary schools, and they've got a lot of parents using. And children deserve sober parents, and they deserve a healthy environment to grow up in. And that's what I want to advocate for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Counselor Flores.
Yes, are you aware of any state or even at the federal level dealing with the potency problem? I noticed that Phil Weiser, who's our Attorney General, is very concerned about the potency. Is anybody looking at legislation either on a state level or on a federal level to deal with that?
Yes, so here in Colorado, Republicans and Democrats came together and they passed a bill, HB 21-1317. I went and testified to support it. That was supposed to call a commission to study a potency cap. And what I do know is the commission did meet, and it was a body of medical experts and scientists, and they were supposed to come back and make a recommendation to the state legislatures about what that potency cap should be. That has not happened. And so you can tell there was 50 organizations behind that bill. They worked very, very hard. It was a brutal fight against the industry on the state level. So they want it to still go through, but the last I've heard, there's no recommendation at this time. The state of Vermont currently has a potency cap on their flour products. It's at 30% THC. On their concentration, their THC concentrations is at 65%. It's either 60 or 65. Unfortunately, and there's been a group of doctors there that have really advocated for the health and safety of Vermonters. Unfortunately, what's happening right now in Vermont is the industry is trying to reduce that potency cap. And it's just devastating because the science shows just 10 milligrams of THC can induce a psychotic symptoms. So in Europe, anything over 15% is considered a hard drug and high concentrations. So my recommendation I'm not a medical expert, I'm a family expert, and I'm highly educated on this issue, is I would cap it at least 10 or 15%. I think that would really reduce the harms. It wouldn't erase the harms, but just to take a step in the right direction would help. I also would recommend getting rid of the sugary flavors they put in all the cannabis vapes. Allow the consumers to really taste what they're consuming, because it is a very toxic substance. The sugary flavors just mask it so they continue to consume. So the potency cap and getting rid of the sugary flavors, I think, would help. I think the consumers just really need to understand what they're putting in their bodies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments? Aubrey, thank you for your courage. You went up against, an industry here that everyone looked forward to upon the legalization, and, they got the okay that everything was going to be okay. And here we are, how many years later? They say that we have the mental health problem on the street because state hospitals closed down and, they changed legislation. But that was a long time ago. Those people still aren't hanging around, most of them. We're always getting more and more people. And if this could be contributed to that, we need to know, because if we're going to tackle this, we need to know what we're dealing with. So thank you very much and welcome back to Pueblo.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
You're
the
welcome.
conversation.
Thank you. Well, we're finished early tonight because we had someone cancel at the last minute. And so we actually have a little time between now and our meeting at 7. So it's 6:30 PM and we're going to adjourn and see everyone back at 7.
Yes. I didn't hear you.
She's worked really, really hard. And like I said, she's traveled the nation and she's said, okay, let's bring all this data together because when they sold us on it, they didn't have any data. They didn't have data from the 70s. They didn't have anything when they sold us on it. They didn't have